The movie begins with a beautiful woman named Seonjin. She is a wealthy woman who inherited all of her family's wealth. She is very arrogant because she feels richer, greater, more beautiful or more special than others. When her mother died, Seonjin had to replace her mother's position to lead the company. One day while traveling to the office, the car used by Seonjin entered a tunnel, but at the end of the tunnel it was not the same world anymore, but it was the world of the dead. Seonjin was very scared and then tried hard to get out of there. The immortal finally gave Seonjin a chance to live 30 more days. The remaining time must be used for Seonjin to change her bad behavior. Then suddenly the woman was in her room. She thought it was all a dream, but then she realized that in her hand was a clock that moved backwards. Seonjin was very panicked and tried to release it but did not succeed. The clock could only be seen by Seonjin, so when Seonjin went to the watchmaker the man was confused. He didn't see any clock but Seonjin's expression was very convincing. She was very upset and hit the table while scolding the watchmaker. Seonjin finally went to the hospital to see a doctor who thought she could help her, but the doctor actually said that Seonjin had a mental disorder. Seonjin was even more emotional. She was very upset and kept overthinking. She then told her assistant to accompany her to dinner.
越快越好，助理，帮我预约最贵的体检。
Seonjin's assistant named Julie. When Seonjin asked about the clock on her hand, Julie was also confused, but because she saw Seonjin was very upset, Julie finally said if she believed in Seonjin. Seonjin's sadness increased when her favorite turtle suddenly died. She went to the animal cemetery so she could bury the turtle properly. The place was managed by a simple young man named Zhao Xingyan. Xingyan was an innocent man who was not interested in women, and also did not care about other people's affairs. Although some people looked at him as a poor man, Xingyan was still happy with his life. One day after her turtle died, Seonjin came to the place. She kept crying for her dead turtle. Maybe because she was too much, Xingyan accidentally laughed. When Seonjin looked at him, Xingyan then pretended to cry again. Xingyan tried hard to hold back her laughter. Unfortunately, Seonjin's crying became more and more excessive so that Xingyan could not hold it back. Seonjin, who knew he was laughed at, immediately became angry. Initially Xingyan wanted to explain that he was not laughing, but Seonjin did not believe it and then chased the man. Seonjin, who was not careful, even tripped and fell into Xingyan's arms. Not long after, Xingyan's friend named Lufin appeared and saw the scene. Seonjin then asked for compensation because she felt she had been wronged. Xingyan's friend finally apologized to Seonjin. He explained that Seonjin had misunderstood. Xingyan actually has a disorder. When sad his face will laugh and vice versa, when happy his face will cry. After hearing that explanation, Seonjin was a little hesitant, but in the end Seonjin didn't care and still asked for compensation, which made Xingyan and his friend confused. Seonjin, who was emotional, became even more upset, listening to the ramblings of two people who she thought were both useless. She felt that she had wasted time and then checked the clock on her hand. Seonjin was surprised because the clock stopped moving. Immediately she was excited and continued to talk to herself. Xingyan's friend finally whispered that Seonjin had a more severe disease. The two of them then made a proposal for compensation. By waiving funeral fees and giving souvenirs, Seonjin finally agreed on the condition of getting sophisticated services, and they finally went to the animal cemetery. While on the way, Xingyan realized that something was moving in the turtle crate. When the crate was opened, it turned out that the turtle was alive again. Finally they returned to the store and treated the turtle Seonjin with acupuncture. Not long after, Julie came to pick up Seonjin. Xingyan's friend and Seonjin's assistant then looked at each other. Lufin, who immediately acted handsome, while Julie, who was flirtatious, immediately spread the charm. Seonjin's turtle was finally able to live again. Seonjin was so happy that they could part peacefully. Meanwhile, Lufin did not waste the opportunity to approach Julie. Xingyan, who was still innocent, could only stare at Lufin's action when seducing Julie, and Lufin was immediately invited to dinner by Julie. After that, Seonjin continued her life as usual as a boss. After working all day, she invited Julie to eat together. Seonjin said that she was very lucky because the clock on her hand had stopped moving. When Seonjin showed it, but she was surprised to see that the clock was moving again. Seonjin also remembered that the clock stopped when she was at Xingyan's place. Seonjin finally returned to Xingyan's shop. Arriving there, it turned out that the clock in her hand really stopped moving. She then told Julie to leave the place, and it turned out that the clock was moving again. Finally, Seonjin and Julie just went back and forth in the same place over and over again. Xingyan, who saw it, became confused. After a long back and forth, Seonjin felt sure that Xingyan's shop was the cause of the clock in her hand to stop moving. Seonjin finally planned to buy Xingyan's shop, but unfortunately, because of Seonjin's very arrogant attitude, Xingyan was not willing to sell it. Previously, Seonjin had sought information about the life of Singyeon. She then reminded that Singyeon had a lot of debt, so there was no need to hesitate to sell his shop and Seonjin would give a lot of money. Hearing these words made Singyeon very angry and felt that his pride had been trampled on. Singyeon finally expelled Seonjin and all her employees. After being expelled, Seonjin then carried out her next plan. Seonjin sued Singyeon because a few days ago her car almost had an accident. She provided evidence in the form of video footage when the incident occurred. Finally Singyeon remembered and apologized. Unfortunately Seonjin will still sue Singyeon, but as long as Singyeon wants to let her live in that place, then Seonjin will cancel her demands. Because he had no choice, Singyeon was forced to fulfill the wishes of Seonjin and they began to live together, but because they didn't like each other, every time they passed each other, they would avoid each other. On the same night suddenly two chefs came to Singyeon's house. They were hired by Seonjin because there were important guests coming. Seonjin told Singyeon that she would increase the rent. Besides that, Seonjin also became more arbitrary by expelling Singyeon from his room, and said again that she would increase the rent as well. Seonjin's behavior made Singyeon very upset. Finally Singyeon lied to the chefs if Seonjin would change the food menu, so they didn't have to work there anymore. After that he began to play tricks on Seonjin by cooking food that smelled bad. On the other side the invited guests had also arrived. Seonjin's feelings began to feel bad because there was a very foul smell, but she tried to calm down and smile at her guests. Sure enough, not long afterward Singyeon appeared bringing a dish that he said was special. Seonjin, who knew she had been tricked, could only hold back her emotions. She wanted to get angry but was forced to smile in front of her guests. When eating the dish, Seonjin vomited. They all couldn't stand it anymore, so they drank a lot. The guests who couldn't stand the smell of the food immediately left there, which made Seonjin's cooperation fail. Seonjin begged them to change their minds but was ignored. After the guests left, Seonjin immediately vented her anger by cornering Singyeon against the wall, which made Singyeon scared. Before she had time to get angry, Seonjin had already passed out in Singyeon's arms. She was drunk from drinking too much, which in the end Singyeon took Seonjin to her bed. Not long after Seonjin woke up, she then went to the bathroom to remove her makeup. Unfortunately Seonjin, who was still half-conscious, broke the water pipe. At first nothing happened, but after Seonjin left, the pipe finally leaked. Singyeon, who heard the sound of the leaking pipe, immediately ran to see it. He held the water and then told Seonjin to get his tools, but because Seonjin took too long, finally Singyeon decided to go get it himself. In a different place, Seonjin accidentally damaged Singyeon's belongings. Singyeon scolded Seonjin for acting carelessly. Moreover, the items were Singyeon's mementos with his father, which made Seonjin very scared when Singyeon scolded her. Singyeon also yelled at Seonjin and then told her to leave. Seonjin, who had never been yelled at since she was a baby, became very sad. While crying, she decided to leave according to the wishes of Singyeon. Not long after, Lufin and Julie came to Singyeon's house. They asked why Seonjin was not there. Singyeon thought that Seonjin was still in her room, but after knowing that Seonjin really left, he was worried and ran to look for Seonjin. Singyeon was surprised to see Seonjin standing on top of the building like a suicidal person. Soon he immediately climbed to the top of the building and quickly caught Seonjin, who wanted to jump. The two of them fell and accidentally kissed. Seonjin was finally rescued, which made the residents, who were excited, to start calm. Seonjin told Julie that he did not want to commit suicide. She was actually making plans so that Singyeon's shop could be bought. In another place, Singyeon continued to be scolded by his friend, who said that Singyeon was not a real man. According to him, women are creatures that must be treated gently, and that made Singyeon feel guilty. After that, Lufin suddenly pulled Singyeon in front of Seonjin to apologize. Singyeon, who had not made preparations, of course became confused. Plus Seonjin was playing victim by plumping her lips to look sad and pretending to cry. Singyeon didn't have time to apologize yet. He immediately ran away and argued that the pipe hadn't been repaired yet. But not long after, Singyeon came to Seonjin's room and immediately grabbed her leg. At first Seonjin misunderstood, but finally she understood that Singyeon only wanted to treat Seonjin's injured leg. Seonjin was so get too emotional because he was treated so sweetly. All of that was done by Singyeon as a pep talk to open a conversation so that later he could apologize to Seonjin. After apologizing, Singyeon then left Seonjin. Seonjin began to be curious and then secretly peeked at Singyeon. She saw Singyeon was sad while holding a photo that Seonjin accidentally damaged earlier. Finally Seonjin looked for a way to repair the photo. She tried very hard until the photo could return to its original condition. After repairing the photo, suddenly Seonjin saw the clock on her hand moving again. She was very panicked and confused. Finally Seonjin walked here and there while continuing to look at the clock. until she found Singyeon sleeping, and at that moment the clock stopped moving. Seonjin finally realized that Singyeon was actually the cause of the clock stopping moving. She then took her cell phone and then took a picture of Singyeon who was sleeping. She then sent a voice message to Julie and said that Singyeon caused the clock to stop moving, but suddenly Singyeon was delirious and then hugged Seonjin in front of him. Singyeon hugged Seonjin so tightly that she could not escape, which made Seonjin forced to sleep in the same bed with Singyeon that night. The next day Julie came to see Seonjin. She screamed hysterically when she saw the scene in front of her. Seonjin then told Julie what really happened, and she also intended to make Singyeon fall in love with her. Julie still couldn't believe what she had just heard, but finally she still wanted to help Seonjin's plan. Seonjin also began to spread charm. When Seonjin shook her hair, Singyeon became like a fool. Seonjin thought she was successful, but on second thought she remembered that Singyeon had an expression disorder, which finally he became confused. Seonjin then said that she would be Singyeon's assistant. Of course it surprised Singyeon. He wondered why Seonjin suddenly wanted to be his assistant, especially since he didn't need an assistant at the moment. Singyeon asked Seonjin why she was always approaching him. Unfortunately, Seonjin forced Singyeon to obey by showing a video recording when Singyeon slept with Seonjin. In the video, Seonjin looked like she was being harassed by Singyeon, which made him scared. Seonjin continued to heat Singyeon. If the video was spread, it would definitely be a problem. Finally, Singyeon begged Seonjin to keep the incident a secret. After agreeing, Seonjin and Singyeon then went to the flower shop. Seonjin began to carry out her mission to approach Singyeon. She then remembered the first lesson from July by starting to talk casually as if she was very familiar with Singyeon. After talking so much, Seonjin was ignored, which made her embarrassed. After that, she remembered the second lesson from Julie. Seonjin began to make comments whose purpose was to praise Singyeon. Unfortunately, she didn't really understand about flowers, so her praise was very chaotic, which made Singyeon immediately leave Seonjin. The last lesson was to be cute. Suddenly Seonjin acted like a child, which made Singyeon spout water while drinking due to the shock of seeing the behavior of Seonjin, but Seonjin did not give up, so she continued to make even more cute movements. After returning from the flower shop, Seonjin took Singyeon to lunch according to Julie's suggestion. She then spoke spoiled in Korean and called Singyeon Oppa. But Singyeon didn't understand, so Seonjin repeated it in Mandarin. This time her expression was made even cuter, but unfortunately Singyeon was too innocent and didn't understand, so it made Seonjin emotional. Not long after, Lufin and Julie came to peek into the car window, which made Singyeon very surprised. Finally, Seonjin and Singyeon invited their friends to eat lunch together. While eating dishes accompanied by drinking, they all got drunk, so they made a riot. After a while they realized and decided to go home. On the way, Singyeon got a call from his relative. Hearing that his relative was in danger, he rushed to meet him. Arriving there, Singyeon saw some people ransacking the place. He tried to negotiate, but to no avail. Seonjin, who saw Singyeon helpless, finally came forward confidently because she had a lot of money. Seonjin promised to remove all the goods there and asked the boss of the people to stop making noise. In the evening, some of Seonjin's employees arrived while calling the boss of the thugs. It made the people scared, and the problem of Singyeon's relatives was finally successfully resolved. Unfortunately, it was not free. It turned out that Seonjin was very cunning by utilizing the situation to bind Singyeon. Seonjin forced Singyeon to sign a contract to become her personal assistant, as a sign of gratitude because Seonjin had helped him. Finally, Singyeon was forced to sign the contract. Seonjin was very happy that her plan was successful, while Singyeon felt cheated and then strangled his friend, who was secretly also involved. The contract took effect that night, so Singyeon was given 1 hour to pack his things. Seonjin, who was very judging at Singyeon, then told him not to walk too close. But when Singyeon moved away, Seonjin got angry again and said that Singyeon had to be near her a maximum of 2 meters. Every few seconds Seonjin kept watching Singyeon to stay close to her. Coincidentally, at that time Seonjin wanted to take a bath. She told Singyeon to stay in front of the door waiting until Seonjin finished bathing. Singyeon was very confused, even though she had done Seonjin's orders, but why was she still getting scolded? After finishing bathing, Seonjin then invited Singyeon to her room. They had to sleep in the same room, so that made Singyeon surprised and refused orders from Seonjin for fear of being harassed. It made Seonjin wonder why there could be strange men like this. Normally it is women who should be afraid of being harassed, but this is exactly the opposite. Seonjin then pulled Singyeon by force, and when in the room Singyeon continued to close his eyes. Seonjin then explained that they would not sleep in the same bed and did not expect more. After that they prepared to sleep. Seonjin arrogantly showed the luxurious facilities in her sophisticated house, so that Singyeon looked rather annoyed. Seonjin continued to look at her watch which had stopped moving, which made her very happy, and they both slept soundly that night. The next day Singyun was very surprised when Seonjin and Julie were in front of him. He had to undergo a trial period and was trained to be disciplined. There were many materials that Singyun had to learn, but he refused because he felt this treatment was excessive, but Seonjin did not let him go and the training finally began. Singyun was told to wear various kinds of clothes, but unfortunately, after many changes of clothes, none of them fit, so Seonjin and Julie became emotional. Singyun then received training from Julie on how to serve well. After a while Julie became upset because Singyun was always wrong. Finally Singyun was told to just write, but because Julie spoke very fast Singyun became confused. In addition, the most important lesson is distance. Singyun must remember what is the maximum distance between himself and Seonjin. They also use a meter to train him. All day Singyun is trained, but to just put things he still hasn't passed, which makes Julie very frustrated. After carrying out various trainings, Singyun was finally brought to the company. Singyun was very surprised to see Seonjin's face, which turned out to be very fierce when in the office. Singyun was still not used to his new life. Singyun's job was to stay near Seonjin so that the clock stopped moving. From morning until late at night Singyun just stayed silent, which made him very bored. Seonjin, who saw Singyun asleep, then walked over to him. She continued to look at Singyun for a long time until finally Singyun suddenly woke up. When he opened his eyes, Seonjin was caught looking at Singyun, which made Seonjin feel very embarrassed. After the work was done they finally returned home. Singyun wanted to take a shower to freshen up, but he was even more stressed because Seonjin kept standing in front of the bathroom door to keep them close. After that they got ready for bed. Singyun had secretly made a plan to escape. He made sure Seonjin was sleeping well, and after that Singyun started to act. Singyun called Lufin to help him. He refused Singyun's request at that time because Lufin was making out with Julie, but Singyun threatened to leak Lufin's past so that he was scared. Lufin finally acted in front of Julie so he could leave her. Arriving at the location Singyun was very upset because his friend was very stupid by walking back and forth without a clear direction. Besides that, Lufin even talked screaming even though Singyun had told him to keep his voice down so he wouldn't get caught. They also began to act. Singyun first lowered all his belongings, but he remembered that his pet cat was still left behind. When they looked for it, turned out that the cat was in Seonjin's bed. Singyun and his friend were very panicked because Seonjin suddenly woke up, which in the end they both immediately hid. Not long after, Seonjin went back to sleep and Singyun managed to escape. Unfortunately, somehow Lufin was waiting for him in the trash while disguised as a pile of garbage, which made Singyun unable to find him. On the other side, Seonjin suddenly woke up again. She was confused to see the clock on her hand moving again. Seonjin immediately checked Singyun, who was no longer there. Seonjin continued to search until she finally found the rope used by Singyun to escape. Seonjin was very disappointed to have been betrayed by Singyun. Seonjin immediately called Julie to her presence and vented while continuing to be angry. Seonjin tried to contact Singyun but still did not pick up either. Seonjin was really annoyed with the behavior of Singyun. Seonjin then thought that Singyun must have helped him. She immediately asked about Lufin to Julie. At first Julie did not feel suspicious of Lufin, but when she tried to call, it turned out that Lufin could not be contacted either. She was surprised to see the location of Lufin's cell phone, which turned out to be near Seonjin's house. Now not only Seonjin but Julie was also annoyed because she had been lied to. The two women finally went to the location of Lufin's cell phone. They were confused because there was no one or anything there, but when they saw a trash can they immediately realized it, thus ending the history of Lufin. Lufin was then captured and taken to Seonjin's house. Then Julie stepped forward as the executor. She expressed her anger and then turned Lufin into a sissy. Lufin continued to beg for mercy from Seonjin and Julie. He acted sad and then pretended to cry, but unfortunately it didn't work. Until finally Singyun returned there. He was surprised to see his poor friend had become a transvestite, and in the end Lufin was finally released. He was still upset because of Singyun, he was unlucky. Seonjin then told Singyun to hand over his cell phone. Hearing that, Lufin immediately took Singyun's cell phone by force, but when he gave it to Seonjin, Lufin smiled very wide, maybe because he was tired of dealing with Seonjin. Seonjin finally installed an application that could track Singyun's whereabouts. She also warned that it would not happen again. Seonjin then left angrily so that Lufin had to make his smile even wider. When it was time to sleep, Singyun returned to Seonjin's room. He thanked Seonjin for helping his relatives the other day. He also returned the credit card previously given by Seonjin, in case Singyun's relatives needed economic assistance. Seonjin then replied that she helped because of Singyeon. Suddenly Singyeon said that he would always take care of Seonjin as long as their contract was still active. The two of them became staring at each other so that Seonjin began to misbehave. She finally became shy and averted her eyes by closing the curtain.